headlines, sorting through the media bias, exposing the propaganda, and challenging you to use your brain. It's time to tap into the truth.
Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed time to tap into the truth. Coming to you live from historic Roane County, Tennessee. With you as always, this is your host, Tim Tapp. And today we are going to talk about ObamaCare Defunded. You know, it's just absolutely mind-boggling to me the fact that it even happened. This is a tremendous waste of time, first and foremost, because we still know that it's just not going to happen. You have the Senate controlled by Democrats, and you have the occupier sitting in his little office space in the Oval Office that he questionably may or may not deserve, you know, where I fall on that question. But here's the thing. It still took a tremendous amount of courage on the part of the Republicans in the House to risk it because it is political theater. You do run the risk of having people question whether or not you're really doing this for the betterment of the country or not. In truth, yes, it is what's best for the country. There's no question that ObamaCare, aka the Affordable Care Act, is in fact exactly what some Democrats have been calling it, a train wreck waiting to happen. Only it's not waiting too much longer. It officially kicks in as law, or at least the individual mandate will, as of October. What that really means is you've got from October until December, really up until the 1st of January, to get yourself an insurance policy if you don't already have one. And oh, by the way, if you do already have one, I hope you don't lose the one you've got and then have to, last minute, struggle to find another one. You will be fined if you do not have an insurance policy on January 1st. And they will withhold it from your federal income tax return if you're fortunate enough to be someone who gets a refund. If not, you will be assessed your fee as part of your taxing process, which means if you owe, then you're going to owe a little more. It's this simple fact the reason why so many of the low information voters have started to turn against this. They've realized the free health care wasn't going to be free. They've realized that there are literally a small novel of forms to fill out just to see if you're eligible. The best you can hope for is a 14-page application. Most folks are looking at a 22 or a 32-page application. And again, you fill all that out thinking that you probably qualify, and you still may not. So you may be told, sorry, nope, you don't qualify for the type of financial aid that we would be offering for others, so you will not get free health care. Go get your insurance policy. And please, by the way, make sure that everyone else in your family has theirs too. That's right. Spouses that do have insurance will also still be fined, according to what I came across today, if their spouse is not insured. Now, I haven't had time to go back and verify that, so if that's incorrect, then I will admit it freely, and ordinarily I don't even mention stuff like that. I haven't had time to check. But with us getting so close to the deadline, it really seems like more and more information still keeps coming out every day. It sounds like something that would happen, but let's put that on the back burner. Let's forget about that for a minute. Let's say that you're one of these poor, unfortunate folks that right now don't have health insurance because you can't afford it. You just don't make enough money to get it. Let's say you work for someone like I don't know, Home Depot. They were the most recent folks to come out and say it. So now you weren't making enough money when you were working full-time for them, and you were just told this past week that your full-time job is going to be reduced to a part-time job. So now you're making even less money. You've got to go find another part-time job, because that's all that anybody's hiring for, so that hopefully between the two of them, you can make up what you're losing on the one, and then still try to figure out some great way to find insurance. I've had a previous broadcast here on Spreaker titled, "If Obamacare is so great, ... And we went on to talk about why so many people in the government and so many people that were supporters of the Immaculate One, the Occupier, were looking for exemptions from this program. Big Labor has been told once and for all, sorry guys, your use, as the useful idiots you are, is over in this case. No exceptions, no exemptions, and no additional cash to make up the difference. Although they were willing to do that for congressional staffers. Bum, 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 proving once again that the political aristocracy is far more elite than the labor. Sorry, guys. But look, you brought this upon yourself. You went around browbeating and helping these people push this down America's throat back when voices of reason were trying to tell you, no, this isn't a good idea. It's a little poetic, but I don't really consider it justice because, unfortunately, the leadership, you guys are bringing in enough money that you can afford to go get yourself a pretty decent insurance policy and comply with the law. It's the rank-and-file membership, the people you were supposed to be representing, that are going to get screwed over on that deal. You know, along with the rest of America. Turns out you didn't do such a good job of protecting your interests there, after all. But, let's get back to the point. Obamacare is, at the moment, defunded as far as the House of Representatives is concerned. Why is that the case? The House, Friday morning, passed a continuing resolution that would fully fund the rest of government as long as no funds went to Obamacare. And this is an effort not to repeal it. They don't have the votes to do that. They know it would never get through the Senate. But an effort to keep it from going into effect on the individual mandate. Although I did come across an article before going on live on Blog Talk this morning, and I have had absolutely zero time to go back and verify between doing that show, doing a little bit of social media to help promote that show, and then getting on here now. In fact, those of you who've gotten accustomed to seeing the 7 o'clock start time for the show realize that I was actually a few minutes late getting started on it as I was working on social media outlets trying to, do the self-promotion thing while we try to build up the audience here. So what are we really talking about? We're talking about an effort to delay the individual mandate. This is, ideally, a way of keeping you from having to have insurance, which we all know is way more expensive now than it was just a year ago. Certainly way more expensive than 2 years ago. And so on and so on. You won't have to have it at the first. You won't have to face the penalty at the first. But even if that's the case, the only reason that you won't have to have it, the only reason that it actually delays it, isn't that the law has changed any. It's the fact that the IRS won't receive the money to pay for the agents that are meant to audit you on your returns and see if you have it in place or not. It's a trick, and it doesn't really prevent you from being held accountable at a later point in time. But they're stalling and they're delayed, hoping that they can gain enough political capital that the opposing side on this one, the Democratic majority in the Senate, and of course the occupier and his administration, will capitulate just a little bit, because they did when it came down to the pressure of the corporations and the corporate mandates. They gave them a delay well past the midterm election. Why, you might ask? Well, it certainly has nothing to do with helping the people, because guess what? Most of the people work for a lot of these bigger corporations. These corporations would have been forced to supply a good amount of cash for their full-time employees in order to help subsidize for their employees whatever insurance they're not currently getting. So this isn't about helping the people at all. It is, however, about helping the Democrats in their attempt to be reelected. Because what happens with big business did have to do this. A lot of those donation dollars would have dried up. In fact, a lot of them that ordinarily they can count on year in and year out would have went to the other side, because they would be trying to get enough numbers back in the Senate and more numbers still in the House so that they could get like-minded people that want to repeal it completely. So the Democrats have to kind of play this little game. This was about keeping their money so they could keep their power. And they're willing to sacrifice your benefit to do that. They've hung you out to dry. Now, Harry Reid has already admitted, by the way, that this is just a transitional step to get to a single-payer system. They're going to socialize medicine completely, but they're trying to force you. This is part of the work of that infamous nudge squad that they've admitted to having now. We talked about that on a previous broadcast here. Part of their work is to make you think that you chose the single-payer system, because it will be a lot better for you than what you're going to get stuck with this private sector individual insurance companies when they're forced to take on everyone with pre-existing conditions and to provide all types of medical across the board, including mental and who knows what else that most of the customers probably won't need. In fact, the majority of young folks really only need catastrophic. And a lot of smart people that are really good with their money take advantage of that fact. They get insurance against something terrible happening, and then they take their chances. Now, that's not always the wisest thing to do if you're in certain fields and areas, but for most average Americans, not a bad idea, not a bad way to save money, and you still have some level of protection. Let's not forget, it's called insurance for a reason. It is meant to be there in the event that something happens. Now, if you have a pre-existing condition, that something's already happened. It stops being insurance and just becomes an entitlement. Now, if you want free health care across the board, that would be great, but that's not what this is, and I don't trust our government to ever implement something like that. And if you can point out to me any single time that they've managed to take over any industry and it be better for it, I'd like to hear about it. Send me a message. Or go to tapintothetruth.com. Send me a message there. Send me an email at ttap@tapintothetruth.com. Let me know if you've got an example, because I will go on the air and say, okay, I had this person send me this example. Say, okay, I stand corrected. There was at least this one. But it actually has to be better. I will still probably address it if I think that it's worth mentioning, but I disagree with you. But anyway, the big talk comes from this. You have people now accusing the Republicans of threatening to shut down the government. But that's not what's happened. The whole point of this particular continuing resolution is that it keeps the government from shutting down. It does, in fact, allow for raising the debt ceiling once again, but only if the Senate and the President sign it into law as is. Now, will the House continue to stand on that issue, or once it gets over to the Senate, which it's already been sent over and they've already been working on it, and I guarantee you, Harry Reid is going to use his little procedural parliamentary activities. Procedural tricks is what Ted Cruz referred to them at on Friday, to put the funding for Obamacare back into it and send it along its way. And then it would be up to the House to stand up to this when it comes time to do the consolidation of the bill. Will the House stand up? Will the House Republicans do it? I mean, I've got to tell you that I'm just shocked that Boehner even allowed it, because he was against this for the longest time. He wasn't going to do it. And maybe he just decided that it wouldn't do any harm to put it out there and might help win back some support in his home district. I don't know what he was thinking, but I'm glad he let it happen. The thing now is, you had Ted Cruz Friday calling for a possible filibuster by the Republicans, hoping that all the Senate Republicans would stand and assist. That's not going to happen, obviously, because there are some Senate Republicans that are rhinos. There are some Senate Republicans that are part of the so-called progressive movement, and they have very little interest in maintaining this is for Al Sharpton, little interest in maintaining a constitutional republic. I'll explain that comment in a minute in case you don't already know. But Ted Cruz was warning immediately that Harry Reid, of course, will use his procedural tricks. Unfortunately, it doesn't even seem like the opportunity to have a filibuster will even be possible, again, because of some of those procedural rules. Harry Reid is going to spend very little time moving towards cloture and trying to force it directly to a vote, and there will be little, if any, time for debate. Ted Cruz wanted to filibuster, limiting of the debate. He wanted to try and stop the cloture to put it to a vote, because he knows even if all the Republicans did get on board with trying to stop Harry Reid from putting the funding back in, they just don't have enough votes to make it happen, and there aren't enough Democrats that are up for re-election and in that iffy, scary zone where they get a little squishy about it. Because, Democrats that are facing re-election don't want to be seen as being part of this. That should be a pretty big clue for most citizens. But there's still folks that are supportive of this because they're buying into this scary, scary talk. They think there are literally still lots of people that think this is going to be just free health care for everybody. By now, if that's what you still think, then you're just not paying attention. And you're definitely listening to the wrong people. Because even the occupier himself has come out and admitted, it's not free for everyone. So, when you've got one of the few times he's told the truth in who knows how long, I mean, he steps up and he says it himself. How is anybody out there still thinking that this is free health care for everybody and it's going to be great? I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. But I mentioned the comment for Al Sharpton, and that's because this past week, Representative Doug Collins, a Republican from Georgia and one of the co-sponsors of the continuing resolution that defunds Obamacare, went on Al Sharpton's show on MSNBC. And I have the clip of that up on tapintothetruth.com. You can check that out. It's on the home page. It's pretty close to the top if you're interested in taking a look at it. But he and Al Sharpton have a nice little conversation where Al's yelling a lot. I don't know, maybe he thought they had a bad connection and Representative Collins was having trouble hearing him. I don't know. But they go back and forth, and Al Sharpton accuses him of ignoring the will of the people. It's one of the things he says. And he also said that it's not the way our country is supposed to work, that the Republicans in the House can hold up a law that has already been passed and the constitutionality of it has already been determined by the Supreme Court, that it is the law of the land and that they can just nullify any law they want to by defunding it. And he had to be reminded, actually, it is in the Constitution that says that Congress controls the purse strings and all spending bills must originate in the House. And to boot, he also had to remind, a little Reverend Sharpton, that we don't actually live in a democracy. What was even cuter is that the next guest that he had on immediately after he stopped talking to Representative Collins kind of made an assertion that it was still a democracy, despite the fact that obviously neither one of them seemed to understand. Yes, we are democratic. We have a democratic constitutional republic. We have people that we send to vote for us on issues. We don't all vote on the issues. And in fact, the Founding Fathers thought that the only thing worse than the tyranny of the crown would have been a democracy. Benjamin Franklin, I believe it was, actually was the first person quoted was saying that the trouble with democracy is that lots of times it comes down to three people trying to decide what to have for dinner. And what happens if those three people, you have two wolves and one sheep? You can't possibly protect the rights, the wills, and the needs of the minorities in a democracy. Because in a true democracy, the majority rules. That's it. In a discussion, nothing else matters. The minority will always lose. There's no protecting of minority rights. And even though you constantly hear the criticisms that, yes, several of the founders were slave owners, they weren't being truthful, they weren't honest, they were being hypocritical, several of them, if you'll take the time to read the Federalist Papers, several of them admitted that they knew that the very principles and ideas they were defending meant that sooner or later slavery would have to come to an end. They recognized that then, but they didn't want to force all of the turmoil on the country that it would do immediately, so shortly after having won their independence. It's the only reason they didn't take up the issue right then and there. So Al Sharpton had to be reminded that we, in fact, live in a constitutional republic. Now, a lot of folks, the so-called progressives, the folks on the far left side of the political spectrum, don't like the idea of constitutional restraints on the government, period. They just want the government to own, rule, and restrict everything, because that's the tool they use for their own personal power and authority. But regardless of all of that, it was certainly interesting to see that exchange. And like I said, you can go to tapintothetruth.com if you'd like to see it, if you haven't already seen it. You probably can also find it on YouTube. I would imagine you can probably find it on The Blaze. And I would be surprised if you couldn't find it on Drudge Report. So if you're interested in watching it, you can check out all those. But I'm asking you to go to check out tapintothetruth.com and check it there, because my web traffic, I like to pad the stats, okay? Go check out my site, please. It's shameless self-promotion. Forgive me, okay? Now, the whole deal about this, why they would pass a continuing resolution right now, is because we are headed towards this showdown over the debt ceiling again. Yeah, that's right. Even those of you who typically don't pay much attention to politics clearly, distinctly remember it has not been that long since we were talking about this before, and it was a big deal, and it was an endless fight, and nothing positive came out of it. So what did happen is they extended it, they raised it, and they went down the road. But in the meanwhile, the occupier, in his great authoritarian style, tried to tell the American people that raising the debt ceiling doesn't raise the national debt. And he even went so far as to say in this same speech that the debt ceiling has never been used to, quote, extort a president for the purposes of political negotiation by the opposing side. You know, that's just flat out not true. In fact, the Washington Post went so far as to do the fact check, and they offered up 4 Pinocchios. Now, this is just the Pinocchio system is a little system that they put in place. It's kind of like a 4-star system, only in this case, Pinocchio, you know, the nose would grow every time he told a lie. Okay, I hope I don't have to explain it, but just in case somebody doesn't get it or think it's a joke, no, this is real. They really do this. And the Washington Post is not the only news source that has a Pinocchio system. But for the Post, 4 Pinocchios is as big as it gets. This is the biggest, fattest lie out there. It doesn't get any bigger. It's nothing but untruth. And put in simple terms, raising the debt ceiling does raise the national debt because they only want to raise it, supposedly, to service the debt. That means they're paying the interest. They're not paying down any of the principal. And why do you have to raise the debt limit to do that? Because they're borrowing the money. They're still borrowing money to pay bills, so how does that not increase your debt? You can't borrow money and not owe more. They talk about trying to deal with the threat of default. And Jay Carney came out and defended the statement and was standing by it. And I got to tell you, Jay Carney is a special kind of guy. Because I have known some really good liars in my day, but this guy, you know, when somebody sits there and they look you in the eye and they know that you're lying, and they know that they're lying, and they still talk to you like they really believe what they're saying. I mean, even when you question them, when you've got them dead to rights, when you have facts right there in front of you, and they just act like you're the one that's wrong, and they're telling the truth. I mean, the entire Obama administration is pretty good at that. So, Carney's big defense on the statement, though, is he goes back and he said, well, we were talking about the threat of default. No president has ever been threatened with the threat of default. Now, that's semantics. It's wordplay. It's typical so-called progressive ideology. Play with the words so that you can technically be right in what you're saying, even though you are intentionally being misleading. And that is misleading because while it's true, we've had government shutdowns, and those government shutdowns were almost always the result of debt ceiling negotiations. Not always. There's been a couple of times where Congress just said, you know what, we're just not going to fund anything until you come to the table with us and we can work out something that's legitimate. There's been times when that's happened, but most of the time, government shutdowns has been a result of Congress refusing to raise the debt ceiling until they got their way about something. You know, there were government shutdowns once all 4 years during Carter's administration. Ronald Reagan had, I think it was 7. You know, Congress threatened the debt ceiling with Nixon as the Watergate thing was about to break loose. Gerald Ford had a debt ceiling issue, and you know the list goes on. Those are just some of the more modern occasions. They made the statement that it's never happened before. Now, Congress during these shutdowns never threatened to default on payments. So technically, that part's correct. But you know why that's not a threat? Because it's only a threat from Obama. If the government has this shutdown, if they don't raise the debt ceiling, there still doesn't have to be a default. the executive office has the authority and, in fact, the responsibility to prioritize payments. Every threat that he's made, every time he says, oh, you're not going to get your Social Security check, or the military is not going to get their payroll check, or we're not going to be able to pay our debts. Well, that might very well be the case, but that only would be because someone, not even necessarily Obama. We know Valerie Jarrett gave the stand-down order over the Benghazi thing now. That's out there. That's public knowledge. There's not even dispute. Constitutionally speaking, that was illegal. Obama should have been the one giving that order if it was to take place. But, Obama he's not just the occupier. He's also the great, what is the word? The great delegator. Because he delegates everything. He's like, Valerie, take care of this. I'm going to go play golf. Joe, take care of this over there. I'm going down here to play cards. Sorry, guys. I'm on my way to another Hawaiian vacation. Nope, gotta go to the vineyard. I'll do that. You guys take care of this. Dude criticized W for vacations, and nobody has ever taken more vacations, and no one has ever spent more money in the process of them, because this family rarely, if ever, travels together. Now, I don't know if there's a reason. I mean, maybe there is. I don't know, but it's expensive as crap, and it's the taxpayers' money that's being spent. And at a point in time where we're going through an economic crisis, it seems less than considerate. Certainly seems insensitive to be just wasting so many taxpayer dollars when so many people are struggling. That's all I'm saying. I think it's a legitimate point. But, again, they're defending this statement. They're accusing the Republicans of saying that you're trying to shut down the government. But it's actually Obama who has said, if a bill for a continuing resolution comes to my desk that doesn't fund Obamacare, I will veto it. They're accusing the Republicans of saying, you're trying to shut down the government because you're not going to get your way. But it's actually the occupier that's saying he will shut down the government if he doesn't get his way. The House is actually listening to the will of the American people. The majority of Americans do not want this monstrosity because they know they can't afford it, and they're afraid of what suffering they're going to go through during the transitional stage from where they're at now to this to the single-payer system. And most Americans still instinctively don't trust socialization of things that they have to have. Catherine Sebelius gave us the prime example. Every liberal that I talk to absolutely hates the phrase death panel when it comes to talking about the ups and downs of Obamacare. They hate it. Why? Because, number one, it's accurate. They don't want to admit that. But it's still accurate from a point of view. Essentially, they would be required to make life and death decisions. And I forget the little girl's name, but I know most of you, if you're listening to this show, you know exactly who I'm talking about. Little girl had to have a lung transplant. Her doctor said she could handle an adult lung. Kathleen Sebelius refused to sign the waiver so that she could have an adult lung. If it wasn't for the intervention of a judge saying, if the doctor says she can handle it, then we give this girl the best medical attention possible. There was an adult lung available. She got the transplant. She's alive today. Would not be alive today if the bureaucracy that will be in place under Obamacare was the final say. And that makes Kathleen Sebelius, in this particular case, a death panel of one. And that's exactly what she would have chose. Said, unfortunately, sometimes people die. And as true as that statement is, it doesn't take away the impact of the fact that she was going to sentence this girl to die that didn't have to. She just needed medical care that her doctor had already said would work. The doctor's not supposed to have your final say. If that doesn't tell you that there's a problem, nothing will. Let's take a real quick break, and then when we get back, we will finish things off. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Tap into the truth. Check us out at tapintothetruth.com for our latest blog posts and for links to all of our past broadcasts. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and to follow us on Twitter. That's Tap Into the Truth right here on Spreaker Radio. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, right here on Spreaker. Tap Into the Truth comes to you live from historic Roane County, Tennessee. I do want to invite everyone, please go ahead and check out Tap Into the Truth on our Facebook page. Give us a follow over there, like that page, follow us on Twitter, and please, if you don't mind too terribly much, go ahead and check out tapintothetruth.com. Don't get to spend as much time updating as I would like, but I have recently updated some of the videos on the homepage. And of course, links to all of the past broadcasts are available there, including today's show from Blog Talk. I am still experiencing some technical difficulties over there. But I do want to mention the fact that while you're at it, maybe you prefer to check out this program and the other one over at iTunes. If you're an iTunes subscriber, just search for Tap Into the Truth. That's TAPP, Into the Truth. That'll bring us up. And you can also find the show, and it has actually already updated the feed. Surprise, surprise. You can find the show, the Blog Talk version of the show, at Stitcher.com and at TuneIn.com. So some great opportunities to check that out. While you're here listening to the show, whether you agree with me or not, I'd still ask you to click the follow button, because I'm sure sooner or later, eventually, we can find some common ground. By following the show, you have the opportunity to get updates, be told when new things are coming on, when the new shows are being aired, and you have a chance to just basically follow the show. These follows do help the stats for the show, which helps us to continue to grow. And the listenership is important for anybody that actually wants to take this seriously. A lot of the Spreaker folks know, too, that a lot of the podcasts here are eligible for consideration to be moved on to iHeartRadio, another great app, which, if we're already on Stitcher and TuneIn, would love to have this version of the show over at iHeart. And, it's a nice opportunity to expand the audience. You've got this here, and then they would have the feed. So this show would become, you'd still be able to hear it here, but then it's also exclusive there. So you wouldn't be getting this feed at one of the other things. So it's very exclusive over at iHeart. I don't know if you're familiar with iHeart or not, but most folks nowadays, I believe, are. They're really putting the pressure on Pandora. Pandora's facing a lot of difficulty competing now when they were the stuff originally. And let's not get too far into all that. Let's spend the last 5 minutes back on topic, okay? Enough of the shameless promotion, self-promotion. You know, you got to do it. You really do. You have to be self-promoting in this business if you want people to hear you and to know, because I never know when the person listening right now may be a first-time listener. Maybe you don't know that you can find this show on iTunes, and maybe you just prefer to download from iTunes and listen that way. And if you want to hear the show, I want you to hear it the most convenient way. If I don't mention Stitcher, maybe you don't know what a great application Stitcher is. I mean, if I don't mention tapintothetruth.com, then you don't know about my website, so you can't go check it out. And you never know when you're going to find something over there that's really cool and give you an opportunity. Beyond that, you know, it's still shameless self-promotion. But let me finish up on this topic, okay? So, I mean, that's why you listen for. In the end, this is still just political theater. Most of the people that I've talked to that are in business appreciate the corporate extension, but they don't expect this close to implementation date, that being October 1st, that this is going to make a significant difference. Ultimately, I think we all know the debt ceiling will be raised. You know, it will be. I don't think it should. At some point, we've got to do something to get this uncontrolled, unsustainable spending under control. And it's going to take something like Congress saying, okay, no more money for anything, although that's not really how it works. But still, that would be the sentiment. To get the people that are in the executive branch right now to really focus in on and decide, hey, you know, we've got to get serious about making cuts now. Sequestration is a joke, because anything they're actually saving under the sequestration is being blown by these extravagant parties and state dinners and multiple traveling arrangements. I mean, even just traveling for the Drink Up campaign, Michelle Obama has spent a few $1 million already. She's only made a few trips. So come on, it costs us millions of dollars of taxpayer dollars. Your money costs us millions of these dollars for them to take trips. And if they're not doing something important, they really need to cut it out. But they've got to get serious about this. If there was a government shutdown, it would not end Social Security payments unless the executive branch decided that's where we're going to make a cut. It wouldn't end military payroll unless the executive branch makes that decision. So if we were to get to that point down this road, and it did happen, it's important that you understand that Congress gets to say yay or nay about whether the money goes anywhere. But once it's approved, the White House, as the chief executive, that's why it's called the executive branch, makes those determinations. Maybe that's what he would plan to do. But if it was to get to that point and then he comes out and tells you, the American public, that this is why it's happening, I'm Barack Obama, and it's those mean old Republicans that have made this happen. Not just the regular Republicans. John Boehner and Eric Cantor, they're all right with me, because they kiss my ass. Jay Graham and Bob Corker, it hurts me to say that, because Bob Corker is my freaking district here, but they're on my side, and they do what I say, and I like it. But it's those other Republicans, those mean, nasty Tea Party people, you know, they're all racist, and it's their fault that Granny's not getting her check now. If you hear that, or something similar to that, you've got to understand, if you know anything about how our government works, then you know that's a lie. So you don't even have to have that explained to you. But there's way too many people out there that just don't know. So please, take my word for it. There's reasons why I'm against Obamacare, and it's not having anything to do with the fact that I don't think healthcare shouldn't be cheaper and more readily accessible. In fact, just the opposite. I would love to see far better healthcare accessibility with reduction. But this was targeted to take insurance companies out of the equation. It was never targeted to help the people. And all you have to do is look at what's happening to understand it. There were no unintended consequences here. They knew what they were doing. Number one, I would never trust our government to run healthcare anyway. The only thing that they're good at is wasting taxpayer dollars. But hey, you know what I always say, and because this is the end of the show, I'm going to say it right now. Don't take my word for it. Ladies and gentlemen, please, please don't take their word for it. Take a little time, do your own research, use your brain, and always be prepared to dig a little bit deeper and work a little bit harder so that you can tap